Hello, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tim and Jim Show. I'm Tim Sohn here in Northeast Pennsylvania, and I'm here with my trusty co-host, Jim. Take it away. Wow, wrong way. Jim, that way.
Hi, I'm Jim Fuse, Fusion Marketing here in Marietta, Georgia, and excited to have join us today someone that I became friends with a little over a year ago, Jaime Cohen. Jamie is she's an amazing, I'm going to say young lady because I think you look young anyway. She's internationally recognized speaker. She's a communications coach and trainer, has a company that she calls The Right Words, and she helps you level up your communication skills to become well equipped to connect more deeply during any interaction. And she's even got a new LinkedIn, well, I don't know if it's new, but a LinkedIn learning course on connecting your audience with live video. She's had millions of views on LinkedIn. And we're excited today because what we're going to be talking with Jaime about is how to join the conversation even when it's uncomfortable, especially relevant now. And so, Jaime, thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing really well. I'm excited to finally be on the show.
Yes.
This has been a long time in the making.
Yes, it is. So tell us, how's everything going in Denver, right? You're in Denver?
Yes, things are going pretty well here. I think it's interesting because I live right downtown, but I live off of an area where I'm not seeing a lot of the action going on right now. So there have been a lot of marches and protests here, but from what I understand and what I've seen so far, they've been relatively calm. So that's been good.
Right. And so,
Yeah.
and along those lines, so Tim, we want to start the conversation. So let's get it started, Tim. Let's ask Jaime how about this.
Absolutely. So, Jamie, can you give us some pointers in terms of how do you join a conversation when it's uncomfortable, especially all that's going on with the Black Lives Matter situation? Yeah, go ahead.
I think a lot of people are afraid of what other people might say right now. I think that's what holds us back a lot of times when we want to say something, is the fear that we're going to be ostracized or ridiculed. And right now, especially, if you are a white person, it is extremely important for you to say something. And normally when we see a lot of people saying things about just a variety of different causes on social media, that's something that we'll often call virtue signaling. So people will say, I am outraged about this. I can't believe they said that, and a number of other things. But they're not really taking any action. So that's normally a negative. But right now, with everything that's going on, saying anything, even just you can say that you're outraged about something. You can talk about what you're doing to how you're talking about this with your family and your friends. Right now, it's really important to do whatever you can. And it's been interesting to me because I've seen a lot of big influencers or mini influencers who are posting every day and talking about a variety of different things, but haven't brought this up at all. And while Black Lives Matter doesn't have to encompass everything that you're posting about, it is important that if you have a voice, that you should be speaking about this. So back to the idea of the discomfort, is that a lot of people say, well, I have a lot of different types of followers, and I'm worried if I say something, then I'm going to lose some of my community, or I am going to upset someone, or maybe I'm going to say something that is going to offend a Black person. And to that, I say, it's really important right now to try. And my company is called The Right Words, and something that I really harp on is you don't have to have the perfect words. It's looking for the right words for the situation. And right now it's an opportunity to learn. So if you say something and you get some backlash or some negative feedback, use that as a learning experience. Say, okay, well, I am learning. Thank you for correcting me. I want to help give a voice to the voiceless right now. And I've heard other people saying, well, I've tried to help, and a Black person said to me that I was terrible and that they don't need me, and that I should just stop in my tracks. Something to understand right now is that even though as a white person our lives maybe feel equal, they're not. And that person that's lashing out has felt oppressed for years, for generations. But the thing is that one person isn't the voice of the entire group of people. So if one person is going to stop you from speaking out, then it's important to have a conversation with yourself about, why do I feel that if one person says something, that I no longer have the power to help all the other people who are thanking me for doing what I can and trying and learning. And something that I've been talking about a lot is this idea of giving people grace. So if someone speaks out and they don't say the right thing, I say, try to be kind when you are correcting them and saying, hey, not the right thing to say, but maybe you could try this. And if you're on the receiving end, if someone says something, to not get defensive and say, oh, geez, I'm really trying to help. I know that I'm going to make mistakes along the way. Thank you so much for giving me some guidance so that I can continue in the right direction. And it's interesting because even this is something that you should use in everyday life. But I think right now, because this conversation is so powerful but so delicate, people are forgetting that the way that they're communicating about this should be the way they communicate about any issue, with some grace, and with the idea that no one knows everything and everyone's going to make mistakes, and every opportunity we have to learn is a great opportunity, because that brings us together and that helps us make a message that's important and more sound.
Yeah, and Jamie, I think it's so important what you're saying. I mean, my wife and I have taken this time. Really, part of this is we all need to educate ourselves about not only what's going on right now, but what has happened. And so there's been some great movies on. We've been watching some movies on Netflix and even on Amazon, Just Mercy, 13th, even Selma, and you don't think about it, but some of this stuff, right? I'm in my early 50s, happened when I was a kid, and so part of you goes through this whole mindset of like, I can't believe that this is still happening. Just Mercy was about a guy that was wrongly accused of murder and put up on the death penalty in the late 80s. So it's not like this stuff just happened. And so I think this kind of goes to sometimes the dynamic of social media is when we have these uncomfortable conversations, we feel like we have to automatically attack the person, as opposed to like take a deep breath and let them say something. Just because somebody shares something or posts something doesn't mean that we have to say anything, right? It's like kind of like sometimes if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. I think that's an issue in our country right now, right? When you look at the world of politics, we have this far left and far right, and we don't have a dialogue about how can we solve problems. I mean, I was totally unaware, even, living in the state of Georgia, that we didn't have a hate crimes act in place. We're one of 4 states. So what can I do? Right? I can help support these sort of things, be that force for change and bring up action. I mean, I have no problem with people protesting, right? I think that's part of what I did as a Marine, was give people that right to protest, to express their First Amendment rights. And I think we have to separate, as an example, looters and rioters from protesters, because I think they're 2 different things. But we have people wanting to label protesters as bad, and that's alarming from a society that talks about freedom of speech and this being a free country. And I know I've seen you got people that are no longer friends on these different platforms because, like you said, they're not willing to listen, which I think is so important right now, but also be willing to have that conversation. And I also think you have to be genuine. But I think to your point, right, people are going to make mistakes and say maybe some things they shouldn't. But it's definitely been a uh, very interesting time.
Absolutely. And I think that regardless of what's happening and how it's happening, it's important to understand that if you are oppressed for a really long time, if you just think about you had like a really bad day and something's frustrating you, and like you throw a book across the room, and you're normally a very docile, calm, you have a strong equilibrium as a person, and you throw a book, and that's totally out of character. So now imagine being oppressed your entire life, your parents' entire life, your grandparents, your great grandparents, so on and so forth. And you just get to a point where you snap. And so just the idea of giving people grace, you have to understand that not every action should define a person. One negative action shouldn't define a person's entire life, but also the protesting is really important. And a lot of people have a lot to say about like, this isn't the way to protest and you should protest in another way. But people said that about Martin Luther King. People said that about Gandhi. People said that about every protest in history, that it wasn't the right way to protest. And like I was saying before, you're never going to satisfy every single person. There are so many different people and so many different communities. And a lot of our beliefs and a lot of the way that we see the world comes from how we were raised. It comes from our religious background. It comes from the people that we surround ourselves with. And a lot of times people are saying things that they've heard before, and they're not even necessarily something that they truly believe, which is why, like you were saying, listening is so important. Understanding someone's motivation, asking questions before you just go in and say, I can't believe you said this. You're awful, like delete. Mm-hmm. Instead of asking like, hey, I really disagree with what you said and it makes me a little angry, which is fine to say. Can you go into some more detail about what you mean? Because I don't understand how you could feel that way, but I'm opening to listening to you and learning about why.
Right. No, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I almost sometimes equate it to, in a sense, everyone is going through, in a sense, the stages of grief, and we're all in different points in that grief because, we're grieving for these lives that have been lost, for no good reason. And we're grieving for the fact that we live in a nation where this sort of thing could even happen, when we're supposed to be this place where everyone can prosper. But the reality is that that's not always been the case. And so there's people that like, well, what do you mean? If you work hard, anything can happen. We'd like to think that's true, right, in the perfect world, but that's not really the case. And so I think we have to have these conversations and not just make this blanket statement of like, you're right, you're wrong, and kind of find that middle common ground where we can all, I think, move forward together.
Absolutely. And understanding that just because you've had an experience doesn't mean that everybody else in the world is going to have had the same experience as you.
Right.
And I think that there have even been times in my life where I've questioned, like, is it really so hard to be different? And then instantly remembered, absolutely, it's so hard. And if you are not the status quo, which in the US, unfortunately, is being white, then your opportunities are different. The way that you experience the world is different. One of my friends went to go look at cars because she was really having trouble with everything going on. And she said, I just want to have one experience where I don't have to deal with racism, and I'm just going to go car shopping. And she went to a nice dealership, and she saw a lot of other people testing out cars, and she found a car that she wanted to test. And the salesman demanded that he ride along with her. And that wasn't happening to anyone else. But she just always likes to keep an open mind. And she said, you know what, this isn't racist. This guy, this car is important to him. Maybe this is how he does it. That's fine. So then they're driving around. She's trying to try out the car, see how everything works. And he's saying, hey, you need to turn here. Like, you need to go there. We need to go back to the dealership. So I don't know where you're going. And she's like, okay, well, maybe he's just having a bad day. And I don't know, this guy could just be a weird guy. So they get back to the dealership. She gets out of the car and she's like, well, okay, I'm really interested in this car. What are the next steps? And the guy's like, yeah, so I don't think this is the car for you. And I have 17 other appointments today, so I'm going to get going. And then her husband, who's white, called and said, like, hey, this is totally unacceptable. I don't understand what's going on here. Like, you need to call and apologize. and they didn't end up getting back to her. And she reached out to this guy. She had his number, and she said, hey, you know, I don't understand why you don't want to sell me this car. And he said, well, you didn't seem that interested. She said, I am interested in purchasing this car. What are the next steps? I don't know how much clearer you can be. And the thing is that even though that seems like a small thing, that would never happen to a white person or a white appearing person. And those are the sorts of things that people don't realize. And if that's one thing, but that's happening in every single day in a multitude of different situations. And actually, so I have a series called Find Me Friday every Friday on LinkedIn, where I feature movers and shakers in the community, people who are doing great things. And this past Friday, and for the future Fridays for the next couple of months at least, I'm exclusively featuring Black voices. And this past Friday featured Kenya Starkey, who is the COO or the COO of Rolodex, which is a digital Rolodex for women of color who own businesses. And it's an amazing platform. So if any of you watching are women of color, you should definitely check it out. It's this opportunity for you to find women and girls who own businesses and to connect with each other. Or if you are not a woman or girl of color and you want to support these businesses, this is the opportunity for you to go and check that out. And I had someone comment and say, we need to look at the numbers here. And I refuse to believe this is a race war. There were 9 Black people killed by police this year, and there were 19 white people killed by police this year. And most of the Black people dying are dying at the hands of other Black people. And I just refuse to believe that this has to do with race, and I won't get drawn into this. And I said, well, you've left a few things out of the narrative here. Yes, more white people have been killed by cops this year, but Black people on average get shot at by cops 4 times more than white people. There are 6 times more white people in the United States than Black people. So if we look at the proportion, there are 54 Black people getting killed in comparison if we were just looking at the ratio. So that's a really important part of the narrative. Also, maybe Black people are dying more at the hands of Black people, but that's not because of the color of their skin. A Black person doesn't go out and say, I'm angry today, and you know what, I'm going to go find some Black people to kill. No, there are a variety of different things going on. Being in the wrong place at the wrong time, having gang violence, being in situations where you need to protect yourself. Like the list goes on. And it's so important for people to stop hiding behind numbers and actually listen to stories. And I know it's uncomfortable, and I can't remember who I was listening to, but there was someone who was talking about why it's so hard for white people to talk about this. And it's because a lot of white people see themselves as good and as kind. And it's hard for them to accept that that maybe they have been racist unknowingly, and that totally counteracts, or that totally defies how they see themselves. And the way we see ourselves dictates our entire life. And so what I have been saying, and what I'm going to continue to say, is if you've made a mistake, that doesn't define your entire life. If you've done something that is bad, that doesn't mean that you're a bad person. Take this opportunity to say, oh my gosh, I made a mistake. I didn't realize that this is what I was doing, and talk about it, because you will be forgiven. We have this opportunity right now to be so honest and so open. And yes, there will be trolls no matter where we go. Someone has to say something, and that's just the way it is. But people will be supportive, and they will say, wow, thank you so much for pointing this out. And that makes me feel really supported. And then go ahead.
Yeah, and Jamie, so this kind of leads into how do we navigate these strong emotions without invalidating them? Because I think that's a lot of what you've been talking about in regards to what's going on.
Yeah, so this is something that I've been talking to my Black friends about a lot. A lot of them have said that they always feel like they have to censor themselves. And it's awful and it's painful, because I don't want to say every single person. This is specifically my friends who I've spoken to, and maybe there are some other people who feel like this too. But what I've been saying is that it's important to be able to express yourself fully without feeling like you're censored, but also speak in a way that people are going to listen. And for this reason, it's really important that white people speak out, because Black people are tired. They've been explaining this their entire lives. And, you know, a lot of my Black friends have said that all of my white friends and other friends keep calling me and say, like, should I wear this? Should I say that? Is this wrong? Is that wrong? They're like, I'm not the queen or king of the Black people. I don't know. I'm not the encyclopedia. Like, I'm exhausted. Don't ask me. Like, go do research. And we have access to so much information right now. If you're not taking the time to just Google a few things or look up under the hashtag Black Lives Matter or any of the hashtags related to these sorts of things, then that's just a little lazy. So it's important to do your due diligence. And also, from the other side, if you have strong feelings, talk about what you're feeling and ask questions on social media. So if you say, like, I feel like I've been this way my whole life. I feel like I've been a kind person, a supportive person, and I feel like I'm saying the wrong things. I'm going to keep trying, but can you please help me do better? And that way you are able to continue the conversation and express how you feel, and without invalidating the feelings of the Black community. And another thing to consider also is the discomfort and maybe the anger and the sadness that you're feeling right now is in this small, just in this like microcosm. But the Black community has had to feel this forever. So you just have to really lean into that discomfort and understand that white feelings are a little less important right now than Black lives. I mean, they should be. And it's more important to save lives than to protect the feelings of some people.
Right. And I think the other thing, right, you're gonna get some truth about what some people are really like, right? In a sense, they're being called out. And I think the other thing is, we can't always worry about, oh, I want everyone to like me. That's not gonna happen. So it's
Mhm.
okay if you lose some people maybe that were following you because you're sticking to your convictions. I think that's okay, right? That's probably better for you in the long run, and you may end up attracting more people. In fact, I've heard of a couple cases where, you know, some people have lost someone because they made a stand, but now they've gotten a whole new following of people that they didn't expect because they have been real and been themselves. Tim, you want to ask our final question for today?
Sure. So, Jamie, why is diversity and inclusion a crucial component in a strong communication?
So if we look at this from a biological standpoint, if you look at an ecosystem, a homogeneous ecosystem will produce weak offspring, whereas a heterogeneous ecosystem will produce strong offspring. So just to break that down a little bit, an ecosystem could just be like a community of organisms or animals. And if there is one type or one family or just a big group, but all the same, the offspring that they produce won't be as healthy and maybe won't survive as well. Whereas a heterogeneous, which just means a lot of different kinds of organisms or animals, will produce stronger offspring because they have something that maybe one of the other animals or organisms doesn't have. So if we equate this to communication and to different environments, we all have different experiences. And if we have all of the same sort of people together, the same sort of thing is going to happen. But if we have a diverse group, diverse in ethnicity, age, religion, gender, that is going to create opportunity for innovation. And if we can look at this also from the idea of working on a project where expertise is needed. The products that and the products that become the most innovative, or the services that are the most innovative, usually people who aren't experts are brought in, because when we have studied something or we've had a belief system our entire lives, there are certain rules that we're following. And as an expert, we say, okay, well, I know that these are the parameters, and in order for me to get from A to Z, I need to follow these guidelines. But someone who isn't an expert, or someone who hasn't been exposed to this environment, product, service, whatever you're working on, can look outside of those parameters because they don't know that they exist. So then they have ideas and different processes that maybe an expert wouldn't think about, because they're following these guidelines, and that's where innovation happens. But another thing to think about also is just the way that we're using the words that we're using. So when we're communicating, if we are talking about something through the perspective or the lens of only a white person, or only a certain community, that is exclusive. So it leaves people out of the conversation. But if we talk about things in a way that everyone can understand, so if we make things very simple, very accessible, and then more importantly, the most important part of communication and inclusion when it's concerning diversity and all different types of people is to listen. Are we listening? Are we listening actively? Are we really understanding what the person that we're speaking to is saying, or are we simply waiting for our opportunity to say something? And a lot of times when people are speaking, you'll see people like, because they're just waiting to say their piece. But the thing is, take a piece of paper, write that down, and listen. So that way, instead of waiting to say your piece, you can ask a question, and ask a question that's really thoughtful, that is based on what the other person is saying. And that way it makes the conversation more inclusive. Really hear the person out. And when we're talking about this specifically under the lens of Black Lives Matter or the Black community, you probably, if you're a white person, haven't experienced anything even remotely close to what a Black person has. So listen to what they're saying. Listen, and don't poke and prod. Just wait to see what they have to say and how comfortable they are with whatever it is they're talking about. And then ask questions in a way that is kind. So if someone says, this has been my experience and it was really hard and I feel awful most of the time and I'm exhausted, ask a question saying, well, if I may, and then your question, or would you mind if I ask this question? Because then you give them the opportunity to say, I don't really want to talk about this anymore, or, I don't necessarily want to answer this, but I will. So it's really important to show respect in communication. And that is a big part of diversity and inclusion when it comes to strong communication, is being respectful, being understanding, and listening.
No, so true. I mean, even like in my own, personal circle of friends, I have a friend. She's got two sons, both played college football. One for Georgia, one for James Madison. The one, was with the Redskins for a couple years, and he's just driving a nice car in South Carolina on the highway at night and gets pulled over for no reason, right? We just don't understand that, because that's never happened to our children. And we have to understand that this is something that these parents of these Black children live with every day, and that we need to understand that that's not right. I mean, it's profiling, plain and simple. And even to your story about your friend at the car dealership. And so we all need it, right? We need to be more inclusive. I think even sometimes, like being in the military, I was, surrounded with people of color, and we just got the job done. So we didn't think about color. But then it's like you leave the military and you're like, well, why do people treat people differently? So it's just fascinating dynamics that I think we all need to be, at least start listening, educate yourself, and don't feel like you got to have the answer, and respect people. I think it's wrong also right now to automatically attack people. It's like, well, you're not saying enough. It's like, well, maybe they're not ready to say something. maybe they need to educate themselves more before they, if you want to call it, make a stand one way or the other.
I agree with that, but I would also add to that that if you are an influencer and if you're posting content every single day and you haven't said anything,
Right.
that you've waited a little too long. And if you're not ready to take a stand, at least just make a mention, because I've seen a lot of influencers doing this, and this is a good start. Before we get started today, I want to point out that the world is a really difficult place right now, and Black people are struggling, and Black people are being killed, and Black people aren't getting the same opportunities that we are getting. Right now, I'm taking the time to educate myself, and I want to take more of a stand. I do need a little bit more education before I put myself out there, but I'm trying. So if you're watching this right now, take the opportunity to look at these resources as I'm doing so that we can continue this really important conversation. Because then you're not saying something where you can get attacked, but you're identifying that this is something that has to be discussed, because it seems a little bit tone deaf to be posting all the things that you're constantly posting, especially if they're things celebrating other people, and to not say in the text and in the video, hey, let's talk about this. And like I said at the beginning, your conversation doesn't have to be totally encompassed by this topic, but it is important to point it out. And I wanted to add to the story where you were talking about your friend whose son was pulled over. It's so sad that when a white kid is growing up, you learn about the police and you learn about what happens when you get pulled over, and what you learn is license and registration. Okay, I can do that. When you are a Black kid or a person of color, you have to learn, okay, when you get pulled over, keep your hands on the steering wheel. When you roll down the window, before you roll down, yell to the police officer, I'm rolling down the window now. Before you do anything, officer, I'm reaching into my pocket for my driver's license. May I do that, please? Or, officer, now I'm going to reach, if you'll allow me, to my glove compartment where my registration is. I'm doing that now, as you'll see my hand going towards my glove compartment. That's crazy to me that you have to basically learn a performance in order to protect your life as a person of color, and especially as a Black person. And that's something that I'd really like people to think about when they're not sure how to say the things they want to say, or how to talk about this topic. Talk about something that you don't understand and just say, I was listening to the Tim and Jim show the other day, and I heard Jaime talking about what it's like to get pulled over as a Black person. This doesn't make any sense to me. How is this happening? I'm educating myself. And it's just something as simple as just joining the conversation in whatever way you can. That makes a big difference. And also, I see some of the comments and questions here. Excuse me, I can't see who they're from for some reason, but I did want to ask if there's anyone who has specific questions about a certain thing that they're going through, or a certain thing that they're not exactly sure how to respond to, how they could do that. And so I'd be happy to answer that if there's any of those.
Right. And also, if you're watching on replay and want to add some questions in, I'm sure Jaime would be happy to answer them as well. And Jaime, I know I'm assuming, based on how we've been connected, LinkedIn and Twitter seem to be your two most active places. Would you say, or are you spending more time anywhere else now?
So LinkedIn and Instagram are where I spend the most time. I don't spend that much time on Twitter, but if you do connect with me there, I will see it. But I do spend most of my time on Instagram and on LinkedIn. I do spend a lot of time on TikTok also, but I haven't posted any content there yet. I've been stalking the platform for the past year. And I will say I've learned more on TikTok in the past year than I learned in all of high school. TikTok, if you are not on there, you are missing out. But yeah,
I just watch on TikTok. I'm not sure that I'm ready to put my dance moves on there. So Jamie, this has been amazing. If you'd like to share also any links you might have, or you'd like people to learn more in the comments to the show, please feel free to do so. I know you were on a great interview yesterday. I don't know if that was just if that was a private interview in the eCam community, or if that's also in some other places as well.
It's on Facebook, so it was through eCam, but it was live on Facebook, so you can find it on my personal Facebook profile, and I'll leave a link to that in the comments. And you can also find it on Dean Reynolds' Facebook profile. And I don't think he posted it anywhere else, but it is public, so you should be able to see it there. We had 2 conversations, so the one that you should be looking for is the one specifically on Black Lives Matter. We also spoke about connecting with your audience using video, which is a course that I have on LinkedIn Learning. So it's the one right before that, about 2 hours before. But yeah, you can find that on Facebook or in the eCam community.
Tim, any final thoughts? I mean, this is definitely a conversation that people need to have.
Yes.
Thank you, Jamie, so much for all your wisdom and insight, because I know this is something, just communication in general, but that you've been doing for years. You're an expert in the field, and I think it's, people need to hear this stuff. People need to think about how we move forward, right? We need to move forward better as a community in general. So thank you so much for this.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I also do want to say that if there's any Black person who's watching this and I've said something that I could improve upon, please let me know. I would love to hear that. Also, don't feel that you have to, but I do want to just say that even though that this is my expertise and I grew up surrounded by the Black community, we all have things that we can learn. And I, just like everyone else, am not perfect. So I just want to put that out there also.
And next week we have Janie Culligan on the show. She has a podcast called That Girl Janie. So she's going to share her story of how she built a podcast from scratch. I just met Janie a few years ago here in Northeast Pennsylvania. So we're looking forward to that show. And thank you so much, Jamie, and everyone who's watching, and Jim, of course.
Thanks, everyone. And, be kind to your friends and your neighbors, and we will come out better once we all start working together. Thanks again, Jamie.
Thank you.
See you, everyone.
Thanks.